Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Sorry about the little hiatus. Tracy has been a super amazing busy lady, and we will jump into that in today's episode. But before we even start, we have some fun, well, I think they're fun, logistical things. Seed Pediatric Services is actually looking for occupational therapists. Anybody who is like-minded and loves to do deep work and provide clinical excellence, please get in contact with us. You can just jump on Seed Facebook page, or you can email, or you can ring. We would be happy to hear from you. And actually, Tracy, is DFX also looking for advanced clinicians?
We are looking for advanced clinicians. So through our website or, social media, you can get in touch with us. And absolutely, always interested in people who are like-minded, like you said, Corey, but also we just moved our clinic to a beautiful new location in Denver, and it's so beautiful that I kind of can't believe it. And so the team is doing magnificent work, and we're growing. So yeah, absolutely be in touch.
Yes, do it, people. We love this work and we love to share it and continue to learn together. So definitely get in touch. Michelle, I think you're on it today. What are we talking about?
Well, today's topic that we want to talk about and invite everybody to join us as we hear from Tracy, who has just been to the Polyvagal Institute gathering and the Unite Safe and Sound Summit over 4 days. So her brain was immersed in polyvagal theory, and she was rubbing shoulders with all the really leading people working in this area. Lots of OTs were there, which is fabulous to hear. And Trace was given the honour to present a couple of times over the 4 days, which, Trace, I just want to say congratulations for that. You're so humble. You won't say what a big deal that was, but I'm going to say that's a big deal, and I'm so happy for you and pleased for you. You were given that honour. There were other OTs who presented. I won't name everybody because I'll miss them, but Go OTs were really proud that you were invited and part of that conference, or that think tank, really, I guess. So today we really wanted to hear what made Trace's brain explode, what was probably confirmed and what was new. We'll go over, I guess, the 3 key areas or components of polyvagal theory, which I'll let Trace talk about. But Trace, how was it?
It was like I can't even hardly describe it. When you go to camp and you have that feeling of deep connection, and then you leave and you long for like those, just the intimacy and camaraderie. But I tell you, I think because, I don't know, a bunch of us were talking about it, that if you took that entire same group of people who didn't really, some people knew each other. I didn't know that many people there until I was there and met them. But because the topic was polyvagal theory and safety, everyone was like manifesting it. And so it was like magic. It was almost like too good to be true in a way. The feeling, that deep felt sense of safety and connection, it was so magical. You felt really engaged and your brain was super switched on. People were talking about profound approaches to really like fixing humanity. Really, it can save the world kind of stuff. For real, it's not a pipe dream. There's incredible work happening, and so to just witness that and feel a part of it somehow, and just, oh my gosh, it was transcendent. It was an incredible experience. There were so many magnificent speakers, we can't call them all out. I will say that one of our colleagues that we all have quite a lot of affection for, Kim Barthel, was magnificent.
Yay.
And
Go, Kim.
so that was really a treat, for sure. So I do want to make sure to just highlight that, and how beautiful OT was represented at this conference was amazing. I also think part of what Dr. Porges had invited me and Randall Redfield, who is the CEO of the Polyvagal Institute. They really see that the work that occupational therapists are doing, especially grounded in sensory integrative and processing theories, has so much direct relevance to polyvagal theory and how polyvagal theory is evolving and how it's going to really influence not just the therapy world. I mean, certainly Dr. Porges sees the influence in pediatrics and in the world of trauma-informed approaches, which are the most direct current applications. But even at this conference, so many discussions about the application to social justice and to education and to how we treat each other in the world generally in terms of just our survival as a planet and as a people. So there's that. It's big. And we're not going to talk so much about that earth-shattering part, but I kind of feel like I just want to hold on to it deep in my essence and try to work toward manifesting it the best that I can wherever I can. So that's real. That's a very real thing for me to share with you. But the other thing is that in Dr. Porges' theory, there are three key components here. There's the hierarchy of the polyvagal states, with ventral and sympathetic and dorsal states as being these really big concepts that are critical to understand. And then the other two concepts are neuroception and just as a definition, neuroception. So we've talked about that in a previous episode, but I think we can talk a little bit about that. My talk and what Dr. Porges encouraged me to try to share was what is the interface of sensation to neuroception. So that was the topic of one of my talks. And so we can talk a little bit about that if you want to. And then the other core idea related to the polyvagal theory is co-regulation, and how this neuroception and the way that the wiring and the neural networks of the polyvagal system work, they both depend on co-regulation and they support our social outcomes, our ability to become deeply, deeply connected in meaningful ways to each other, and how each deep, meaningful connection begets a deeper level of humanity in each of us every moment. And so it's this spiraling continuum that we talk about in the spirit model, but with the core of it being our socialness, our sociality is the word that Dr. Porges uses. So those concepts, I think, are deep. And even though I feel like I understand this theory really well, I feel like it slips away from me when I see the magnificence of it and really how deep it is, and yet it's kind of simple in one way, and the simpleness comes from just one word: safety. So the whole essence of it is that if your nervous system or you as a person don't feel safe inside, outside, and in between, then you're going to have difficulties. You're going to suffer and struggle, and that suffering and struggling could even impact your development. So safety is a notion that's embedded in neuroception, but wow, when you only think about safety as like the base of regulation, it kind of simplifies things.
Tracy, when I think about it, you was talking about when you consider it simply, and deep neuro is not my strength. I tried to get my head around it. But I have watched a few, we've got an online subscription to the gathering, and so I've watched a few of those presentations. And I guess, just even without even thinking about it clinically, I felt, I could see, I could neurocept that all of you in that environment, whilst there was nerves speaking, I guess, initially, there was this sense of, oh, look at them, something's happening there, like how you were speaking, how your body was. I knew you were being, you in particular, Kim, as well, you were being held. I felt like there was this perception that the crowd was holding you and you were all in it together. I was an outsider looking in, not live time, but it was like, wow, what is happening there? So I perceive that whilst everybody had some nerves, I guess, about it. I'm not talking about you, Trace, but there was felt safety, that just was like, oh, there's some safety in this despite them speaking in front of thousands of people. So I think you can...
You know what was hilarious? Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, what was hilarious, Tracy? Michelle and I texted each other when we were watching your presentation, and I was like, Michelle, I'm getting really emotional watching Tracy talk. Like, I'm so proud to know her. And it was really exciting just to have representation of what this interfacing between sensory integrative work and polyvagal theory looks like, and how people can have really detailed descriptive discussion around this coming together of these two things. Because, like you said in your talk, they really beautifully complement each other. And it is not surprising at all, because it's all just neurology. And so if they didn't complement each other, it's like, well, the brain is the brain. Are we actively reflecting what's happening in the brain, or are we not? So I think it'd be so great to hear your thoughts around those three pillars. So I know we've definitely talked about the neuroception part and safety and threat and activation and deactivation, but we can talk a little bit more about that. But I know you said that you got new revelations about co-regulation. And I don't know, that blows my mind that you, of all people, in my eyes, I'm not trying to make you feel strange, but you got new revelations about co-regulation. Yeah, that's mind-blowing to me. So I'd love to hear what new things you put together around that concept, if you're ready to talk about that first, because I'm jumping into it.
So here we are, learning, thinking about co-regulation, and I feel like in my clinical work and just in kind of who I am as a person, that I co-regulate people all the time. And I think I really mindfully do it when I'm in a clinical situation. Mm-hmm. And I'm often, helping parents deepen their capacity to co-regulate. I'm often helping educators in classrooms to meet kids where they are and cultivate that. So I think that it's like a thing that I understand, and yet here I am in this conference. So there was a beautiful session that Deb Dana did where she did a live demonstration of co-regulating a beautiful soul, Leah DeWong, who works for the Polyvagal Institute. She happens to be finishing up her training as a somatic experiencing practitioner. So for those of you who don't know about somatic experiencing, it's a polyvagal informed trauma-based approach that deeply requires awareness on the part of the practitioner. Takes a long time to get certified and trained, like 3 years of really full-on training. And within this work in somatic experiencing, you have to really build a lot of self-awareness. So this is this woman who has a lot of self-awareness working with Deb Dana, who's the most exquisite clinician really on the planet. And, so she's just taking her on this journey of envisioning, because she's an adult who can do that, just like you and I could do. What is your ventral state? What is your dorsal state? What is your sympathetic state? And then within taking her on that visualization journey, Deb was just offering in an intentional way, going with her on that journey, just patiently kind of going with her, but continually offering a ventral state. And it was really magnificent to behold. But what happened in my body in experiencing that, in co-experiencing that, was that I had this kind of funny aha. And what the aha was that when I think about co-regulation, I think about it as an ongoing thing, except that so often I think for therapists, what I notice is they think about co-regulation when the child's dysregulated and bringing them back to a state of regulation rather than a continual presence of connectedness that fosters the best in you and the best in me continually. And so there's a minor shift in terms of, sometimes I think about generally when I notice therapists, especially OTs, thinking about co-regulation, they're doing it in more like, I'm going to co-regulate you in this moment, and then I'm going to kind of go back to we're together, but I'm not necessarily thinking that being together is also co-regulation. Do you see the difference? There's like this little shift in the temporal spatial nature of the container of co-regulation that happened for me. And I wanted to kind of bring it up and talk about it with you guys and kind of just hear your responses to that and see if that's different or the same of the way that you think about co-regulation. Yeah, so it's an interesting little moment of broadening it in a way.
This is really weird, but I wanted to say, Michelle, then I'm sorry I'm interrupting your ahas, but Lindsay, so I'm married to Lindsay and he is also a pediatric OT, and yes, that's a strange thing, but it's wonderful. And we sometimes, mostly we try not to, but sometimes we have discussions around some of these concepts, and really interestingly, he and I were kind of disagreeing about what co-regulation was as a definition. And I was like, if you and I can't agree on this, what is going on in our profession and how are we defining this? And is it actually the same? Do we all define it in the same way, or is it different? Because he was saying, and speaking for him now, but hopefully I get it reasonably accurate. He was saying he was thinking about co-regulation as not necessarily like, he was picturing it as sometimes parents co-regulate children, but they co-regulate them into a dysregulated place. Like he wasn't taking it as one's the anchor. As in, I was always saying co-regulation is I am the point of anchor trying to pull them into a place of more regulation or greater access to ventral vagal state, if we're talking about polyvagal theory, or bringing them into a space where they can access more capacity to do whatever it is, whatever it is they need to be able to do. But he was saying that's not just parents, but even clinicians sometimes co-regulate that child into a dysregulated place, or they miss the mark. And so I was like, I've never thought about co-regulation not being regulating. Does that make sense?
I'm going to add my thing because it's along the same line. I see it as a relationship. I don't think it's an on and off button. Like I don't put it together like you mentioned, Trace, as it's a one way that there's a regulation and I'm down regulating or I'm up regulating to optimum. So it's not just a one way. But I don't perceive it that I'm an anchor. I often can be, but what happens by nature, I'm not actually that playful. And I tend to be in my head. I feel like I can attune to people, but I sometimes want to get on with the business. And so kids often co-regulate me to a more playful state than I would go. I hope that I'm supporting them to an optimum, band into a ventral state. But they take me to a playful state where I get out of my cognitive, this is going to happen next, and then I'm going to do that. And then, if it tips too far, then maybe I might go, oh, what do we do? Whatever. But so I'm kind of with Lindsay on that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't disagreeing with him. Like once he said that, I was like, yeah, that's totally true. But I never really thought about it. I never thought about co-regulation as being dysregulating. Does that make sense? But it's so true because it's a co-constructed thing. Like it's co-regulation. It's not I'm regulating you.
And it's not just to
Yeah.
optimum, it can be out of optimum in any way.
Anything. Yeah.
Can it, Trace?
Yes, absolutely. All of that. It's yes and all of that, right? It's so what I love about this is that we feel like we understand co-regulation, but there's so much more to unpack here, and there's so much more to try to understand.
Yeah.
So in the deepness of relationship and in the way that humans are with each other, we are going to travel to the states that we're pulled into. And what's interesting is that, you know, if you're at the playground and the affordances around you, around the child, invite a certain level of playfulness, of exploration, it's likely that that attitude, that essence of the child's experience is then shared to the adults around them, and it might bring about more playfulness. If the child has vulnerability in the activation that happens in that joyful, jubilant exploration, they might start to become sympathetically activated and tip away from staying in an organized, safe space in their nervous system. The activation can tip them into franticness and into a loss. And so we're often co-regulating parents or helping them to understand that when that happens, we need to help bring the child to a place that's safer. But sometimes what happens when I see therapists try to coach this is instead of shifting into safety, they shift into downregulation. And what's really important is to remember, and we get this deeply from the polyvagal theory, that the place you're anchoring isn't into a lower state. The place you're anchoring them is into safety, no matter what state they're in.
This is what the gap was with Lindsay and I when we were trying to have this discussion, was we were lacking the terminology from the polyvagal theory to explain what we were trying to say, because I was trying to say, yeah, but when a child goes into a state that is trickier for them to stay engaged in what they're wanting to be able to do, right? So maybe they wanted to be able to play on the playground, and then suddenly something's happened and their state has changed, and now they're suddenly not able to stay in the play. My job as a therapist is then to help figure out how to get them back to the place where they can do the playing. And you're right, it's just offering that safety. And what you were saying, what Dave Dana was doing, is continually, therapeutically, intentionally, mindfully offering ventral vagal state. And I really would love to hear your perception of what exactly she was doing that was ventral vagal.
Can I just break down what you just said, Tracy, because I have not thought about it, because I probably think if I had to describe it, I would say, oh yeah, then I co-regulated them. But what, when they moved out of that, into a more dorsal state, that I regulated them or moved them back towards a regulated state. The difference in what I'm trying to pick up on, the nuance of what you're saying though, but you're really saying in co-regulating them, you're offering them safety, a felt sense of safety, so that they, so the ventral vagal tone turns back on, so that they, correct me if I've got that.
Right, or that you activate
vagal tone.
Yeah, and that you're activating the vagal brake,
Yes.
right? That the vagal brake isn't always a total down regulation. So let's kind of stay on the playground together, okay? So we're on the playground. The child is, vibrantly playing. They're being very exploratory, and maybe something happens that tips them into so much activation. Maybe they want to get on the slide and another child is trying to get on the slide, and they get competitive and they start to push out in space, and then that aggressive tone starts to take over, and now it turns into full-blown aggression, and they're pushing the kid and they're ramping up, and now their language is getting aggressive and negative. Their body tone is elevated. They're intense. They're and they're into sympathetic activation that is now not in a safe space. And so what we might do as an adult in that space is different depending on our relationship with the child, right? But what could happen to a parent who gets triggered in that state is now they're sympathetically activated and the child is sympathetically activated, and the whole thing is going to snowball in intensity because the child then can't feel the safety signal from the limit setting because maybe the adult is too intense and aggressive. And the whole thing, and we know this situation, we can picture it, we can feel it, we understand that this happens to our kids all the time. So the idea would be that in your own self, that you realize that, we say this all the time, you have to regulate yourself first. But you have to see that, the intensity here is intense, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer this child in their body, in their own self, in the space around them, and in my relationship and interaction with them. So in all three of those spaces, I'm going to continually offer signals of safety, and I'm going to offer my own ventral warm welcome space as a place for them to reference and draw from so that they know there's a different state possible. And that all is actually the conduit of shift for that child, because as soon as they access, I don't need to push out, their ability to regulate will be different than if they stay in a state that isn't safe.
So they will see you, Trace. So I'm imagining you, or me, working out, he's activated and energized, and or she, I am going to try and suspend my theories about why that happened, or may not, but I'm going to go to the child and I'm likely going to get down to their level and, have a soft face and try to kind of catch them in a really soft way so they tune in to me. And hopefully by seeing my eyes and the soft face, whatever it is, I'm going to do things that signal safety. So by them, ideally, their neuroception is going to perceive me as safe, and that's going to shift. That's a mechanism by which shifts their state. Is that right?
That's right.
There's a piece here that I hadn't thought about before as well, though, Tracy, which was I listened to Dr. Nikki's presentation as well, and she talked about the safety in their own body, the safety in between interactions, and then safety and not just in between the interaction of the individual and the other person, but between the individuals around them, and then the environment itself. So like the playground itself. I'm thinking about at a school the classic example of one child steals another child's ball because they think it's funny and it's they're being playful and funny, and the other child is like, they're just gone, right? You can see it in their face. It's not on for them. They get so sympathetically activated. You can tell if they get close enough, they're going to punch that kid. They're going to hit them. And the energy, straight away, neuroceptively, you feel it straight away. If you're there and you're watching it, you know something's going to happen. And so at that point, it's like, okay, I can intervene here. And often, if they haven't gone so far into their own sympathetic activation, often you can offer that child a ventral vagal opportunity or a co-regulation point of your own safety from you, that they're able to hold it together enough that you can help them mediate that problem and then have a solution. Or even if you can't even help them mediate that problem, but you can help them hold it together enough that you can ask the child to give the ball back. Like, do you have those? Like, I'm sure you have the examples of that, Michelle. Although I'm thinking more of like standard state school, like not even a specific school. You'll see that everywhere, right? So
you see that in adults. You don't have to go very far.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's the safety that shifts the state. But when we're talking about co-regulation, Trace, it's how, and that's, I guess, your question earlier, Corey, was around what did Deb Dana do to stay in that space to offer co-regulation that you felt, Tracy? Because I guess in our work, I listed some. You get perhaps down lower, you're softer, your tone, your rhythm. We've got some things that I feel like we would cue safety, Trace. Was Deb doing things differently, or did you just witness it and it resonated differently from seeing me working with a child, or one of your clinicians working with a child? Why did it feel different?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. First, I think that very often in those situations with a child, so not in the situation that I was observing at this conference, but in a situation with a child, kids sometimes don't have the internal resources to just draw from my safety cues, and you have to have more active ways of having the vagal brake kind of activated. So I might be offering, breath. I might be offering my body as a container. I might be offering an opportunity to say, push hard on here. Your body needs that push. Wow. Oh man, alive. And, kind of joining them and acknowledging and letting them know that I understand the state they're in is the state they're in. And I'm going to stay with them. So there was this profound nature of Deb kind of staying with her. But what she was doing was just so actively and subtly continuing to offer that she was never not present in exactly the way that the receiver needed her to be present. And I think what happens when we have kids who dysregulate is that it can trigger us, even when we think we're being good at staying regulated ourselves. But truthfully, we're making a judgment about that kid's dysregulation. We're seeing them as being naughty or out of control or scary or something. And those things could be true. But if that evaluation, like at the end of the day, the hedonic tone, the signal, the valence of safety or threat is a valence, it's an evaluation. And if we evaluate, we pull ourselves away from it for a minute instead of maintaining the continuity. And it's the maintaining the continuity. What was interesting is that the woman receiving the support, she was visualizing that it never went away. There was always a constant presence of support. And I think that sometimes we shift our state ourselves, and the kid starts to feel kind of scared. And that only makes regulation harder. Does that make sense? It's profound, but and subtle.
It's so amazing because I think we're describing the process of what has happened for me in terms of my journey as a therapist. Improving is this skill of suspending the judgment in the moment and taking things personally. So this is continually a thing that I have to work on like all the time because it just is, and I'm human, right? But I feel like my ability to suspend the cognitive part of the doing and the what's next and the this and the that in treatment, to be that present co-person in that space. When I'm able to do that, it's like in the treatment session, you have these doors that open up and you can either go, oh, that's a thing that we can go there together. Or if I'm too in my head, I miss them, and I still miss them. It still happens. But I feel like this is the describing of this process for me. Okay, if I'm able to stay present, ventrally vaguely activated more frequently in my sessions, I'm going to be able to match the child better. And then I'm going to allow function more often than previously.
I could only have this conversation with you guys.
That is not true, Tracy, but I'll take it and I'm honoured, but that is not true. Corey, your example where, so it's the knowing of self and knowing around self about particular areas when we might be triggered or less able to catch us in the moment. So I think, Corey, you and I over time, and Tracy's facilitated us to get out of our heads and be present and attuned. So that feels graspable at the moment. I have had a really interesting little guy I'm working with at the moment. Perception is there's some attachment issues. I think he's acting them out with me in sessions. Some of his themes are around being the boss. So he's, says a lot, "You're not the boss of me." He definitely is driven to win and be better than others. So it's been a bit tricky. I've started recording each session. In the session, I was mind blown. We were playing a game of hide and seek, or some, a really basic safety. Am I safe? Are you going to find me? Are you, reliable and dependable? Somewhere along the line, he picked up a noodle and he started slapping it. It was making a loud noise, and then he kept moving into my direction. In the moment, I was scared that he was going to hit me, but I was thinking, stay safe. He's testing you out, Michelle, just be with it. So I tried not to say anything in that moment, and he didn't. He kept slapping it. But I know I felt that I was working hard to stay safe and regulate myself and not give off the vibe that I was not feeling safe. When I look back to the video, he was a long way from me. It was loud. He did move it in direction. He was never going to hit me. But it was only when I was away from the situation and safe that I could view that interaction as, "Oh, Michelle, he was playing. He's certainly testing you out." But your perception, I neurocepted threat and felt, threatened. I would have withdrawn. It's a side angle of my face, but there was no way on earth that my body would have felt so threatened and then activated that I could have covered all of that. I'm sure he neurocepted that I felt unsafe and it got wobbly. We got wobbly because I stopped, I shifted state and wasn't able to keep co-regulating him. So then he actually kept getting activated, and then I moved away and I started another game with the noodle, such that I picked one up and then we turned it into a hitting of the balls. So I tried to maneuver away from him threatening me with the noodle. When I look back, I'm sure that wasn't lost, what I was trying to do there. Anyway, there's a million other ways, but I know that I didn't manage and need to keep working on that activation, the loud noise, the threatening thing that I perceived wrongly in that moment. So I guess that's what you talk, that's my physical experience or my lived experience of having a wobbly moment whilst I was trying to co-regulate, and that it goes both ways, Trace, that in him slapping that noodle close to me, something shifted. My state shifted, and then that went back to him, and then, it unfolded a bit, we unraveled a bit, and then I tried, gathered myself and then turned it into something else. So I kind of got away with it, but I guess when you're talking about safety and reflecting really deeply on our own selves and what triggers us and how, it just... that would have all been lost on me if I didn't record the session and watch back. Yeah.
I felt like you were describing my own inner experience in many sessions when physical violence pops up. It's very, very hard to stay ventral. And I felt that when you were saying I had to work hard, I was like, yes, it's hard work to stay ventral and offer ventral when that's the presentation. And there's, each of us has their own trigger, but for me, I find that harder as well. If that happened again in another session, Michelle, how would you have liked it to have been worked through instead of, because I know you said you kind of got away with it, but what would you have liked it to look like?
And before you answer that, I want to add a layer, and that is that this little guy has an attachment issue. So it's
Yes.
likely that this mismatch has been his lived experience. And, we're not going to be 100%. And we are going to struggle to stay in ventral. And we will need to have ventral and sympathetic states co-activated in order to get through that moment, because there's no way as a human that you're not, if you feel a threat, you feel a threat too. Your neuroception tells you that. So and the misattunement, the mismatch, is actually part of the pendulation and the healing and the helping him to build his capacity. So, but because you were mindfully working hard, that's the whole thing in therapy. We're mindfully working hard to come back around, create a different opportunity for adaptation. And that's precisely what you did. And so, there will be those mismatches, but watching the mismatch was the profound thing. You couldn't see it in the moment because it was too intense. You could only see it on the video. And what an important thing for this little boy that you could see that, because I think that's probably been his lived experience, is that people don't get his intensity. They misread his intensity. They push people off, and then he has to figure out how to rope you back in. And that's tricky for a little guy. So then with all of that context, think about, how will you proceed?
And because I've kept working with him weekly, I've had it keep presenting in different iterations of this. And, I need to say that I'm activated now, even thinking back, which is what happens to us, that I feel activated. I feel charged.
We're here with you, Michelle.
Thanks for holding me. Can I say to the audience, this is really organic lifetime stuff. We don't prep our podcasts, so it's real. They're holding their hearts and they're like, oh, are you okay? Thanks for co-regulating me. What I, in the moment, thought was a lost opportunity and it's exactly, I think, Tracy, what you've said, in that's his lived experience. And if, at the very least, I wonder that his experience is everybody tries to shut that down and turn it, into something else really quickly. What I've been able to do, and it's fascinating, and I don't really want to present this case right now, but
you've landed here.
This is what happens when you don't plan. Is that I didn't want to hurry so fast around that I, after that experience, thought, do you know what, which I did at the time, say, oh my goodness, that is so loud, that gave me a shock. So I did a bit of that, but then as it got closer and as it actually more threatening, I didn't really narrate it. And then I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So when it turned up again, it was like, whoa, that was so close to me. I felt like that was going to hit me in the face. I need a minute now. And so I was trying to model or share what was happening for me, that, wow, I just got so scared. I'm going to have to step away for a minute. Whew, that made my body tingle, or get really electric, because I really thought you were going to hit me about that. So then I kind of took a breath and just was like, oh, I think I'm ready for that again. Do you mind if I get a noodle too? Or I think I did ask him a session later, hey, were you really going to hit me with that? Are you trying to hit me with that? Or were you just like telling me that you were really mad? Or are you playing around with the sound? So I was just trying to understand it. Fascinatingly, that was not what he wanted to do. Like he wasn't ready to have a conversation around what his intention was. And to be really honest, I don't think he knew what it was. My wondering is things unfold for him really quickly, and then he does something. But when I tried to kind of explore how did that go from a playful game to it feeling threatening for me, what happened there, he didn't want to know about it. So he still has a hard time exploring that. And sometimes he was like, stop talking so much, let's just noodle. And so he doesn't want to hear me narrating my feelings and emotions, like, rah, just slap. So it's just where he's at. But that's, I guess, what I was trying to do is not be so fast to signal to him that's not okay. We're not going to noodle slap, in this session. That I wanted to be like, oh, you want to explore noodle slapping? I can go there with you. I can explore big intensity, and I wanted to unpack that emotionally with him and what underlies that. He's not quite ready yet. Anyway, I need some mentoring around that, Tracy.
Yeah, but the thing that's interesting is that when we think about those valence tipping points, right? At the higher level, away from just safety and threat, we get to these levels of felt experience that include, we're in this together and we're having fun, and we have a shared agenda, we have a shared level of trust. And when trust is violated for kids like this, the sense that they can get is either I've lost control, so now my only way to control is with aggression, or they get a sense of shame, and that shame becomes very big. So it sounds like in the past, people would have set a limit, and he may not have graded control. He may move into sympathetic activation and not have volitional control over that big intensity that he's pushing out into the world. But then people respond to it as if he does have control, and not you, but in his lived experience, and that triggers shame. So for you to venture into processing it, help me understand what's going on here. He's like, well, I don't want to talk about that because I feel bad. But he didn't feel bad. He kind of was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, but I don't know that I want to do it. Yeah. So what a beautiful opening to the possibility of actually deepening his understanding of his humanity that you've created through that. And it just takes lots of iteration of trusting that when we talk about this, it's not because I did something that you don't like me anymore, that I've lost your trust, that I've lost my connection with you, that our secure reliance on each other varies based on my state, which has been his difficulty. He can securely rely on you to be authentic, and it's okay to authentically share your experience. So I think you're doing the work there, and it sounds fantastic.
Yes. But I guess what the case has highlighted for me is that I'm finding it really challenging. And since that, there was another thing we were doing, a sock wrestle game. We were putting a sock on each other's, foot, and we were trying to pull it. In the video, I perceived that he stopped the game pretty quickly, and I was like, oh, I wonder what happened there. When I looked back, I was looking very physically. I got down and, was in a puppy dog kind of position. But then I was like ready, and I see that I look very physically agile and strong, and I look like I was going to win. I look threatening. And I see now that I didn't mean to. My intention was like, okay, I'm ready to go, and probably pounced. But I see that he perceived that as threat and was like, wow, I'm not playing with you. Because you're going to win, and I like to win. And it was a bit not my intention, but there was a menacing component in how I moved my shoulders. So it was like, whoa, wow. Anyway, he is really teaching me so much around my capacity to co-regulate when it looks different, when he doesn't respond reliably. So that catches me, and I do be like, oh my God, what am I going to do next? But I know that I am pulling away and trying to buy some time, which I know he's perceiving. And he does have that big, loud physical aggression component to it, which again is tricky. So it's just interesting that knowing thyself just really never stops, where I think, we've worked hard to try to stop being so cognitive and planning and all the rest of it. But it was like, oh, thanks, kiddo. Obviously, I've got to go to the next level of area where I try to receive, be regulated.
Seriously, I just want to say you will have validated so many people in that unveiling of wonderful vulnerability that you just gave everyone around your experience around this child, because I just sat here like shaking my head around how amazing that was, because this work is like, it just pulls us apart down the middle, explore all your own junk. And I honestly think I've become a whole different human being in the time that I've started this journey and then where I am now. And I have no doubt that in the next however long I'm in this space, it'll just continue to it just keeps unfolding, right? And I don't know, it's only in these discussions and your willingness to video yourself on your hard child. That was me. I was like, I don't get this. Something's not right. I can't understand it. I'm going to video it. And it gave me the space to look from a distance without the intensity of the moment, because it's like, you know, we talk about children misperceiving sensation and intent and whatever, but we do too. Like I can distinctly remember early on in my career, Tracy, showing you a video of a child. I was playing with a fish, a big Nemo fish, and I was like, and went to like eat his foot or maybe it was his shoulder or something, and he got so dysregulated, so sympathetically activated in that moment. He had the angriest face. He stood up and he looked at me and he was like, don't do that. And he got so angry, and I was so thrown off because I was like, oh my gosh, like I have no idea what just happened. Like we were playing and then suddenly he is off the charts mad at me and I have no idea what happened. And in the video, I was like showing it to Tracy. I'm like, I still don't really understand like what is going on here. And she was like, can you see the speed at which you use the fish, the angle at which you came at him from? It was behind space. He doesn't get behind space. He's tactily defensive. You know, these things played into his perception of that. And that was his truth, right? And I was like, oh, like that, I get it. But in the moment, if I hadn't videoed, I still wouldn't ever have understood that. And again, my hard kid, right? So just thanks, Michelle. Thank you for being Michelle. Like really, it's really, 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 really amazing.
Yeah, beautiful, generous sharing. And I think that this discussion is, like you said, Corey, just going to help so very many people feel like, oh, wow, I'm working at getting this right. And it's a lot of work to move in the direction of really deepening our practice. So, wow, that was beautiful. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by SEED Pediatric Services and Developmental FX. For more information, please go to our show notes on our website, spiritedconversationspodcast.com, or catch us on our SEED and Developmental FX Facebook or Insta pages. So grateful to have you with us for this episode. Take care, and we'll see you next time.